Hi everybody, welcome to Poker with Kids, episode number 42. This time we're looking at the WPT League's quarterly poker championship that happened on the Gold Coast. This was a huge event. The venue for this time changed from its traditional home at Seagulls and Tweed Heads, with the issues that they had been having with COVID, border restrictions, potentially hotspots, closing borders, that type of stuff. They made the call fairly early after a number of events had to be effectively cancelled to move the event to the Gold Coast, to the Gold Coast Turf Club and Event Centre. This was a big venue, probably at least double the size of the big auditorium at Seagulls, which allowed the WPT League to set up, I think it was 101 tables. They had, the vast majority of them were the round 8-seater tables for self-dealt games, but they also had one end of the table as the larger sort of what you'd normally call the standard sort of 10-seat tables, which were for the dealer run games, things like the various high roller, bigger buy-in events that were dealer dealt rather than being self-dealt. They also had an RFID table thanks to LCA Poker, which was like a feature table for different events, final tables, that type of thing. So 101 tables, 8 people per table, so you're looking at 800 or so capacity, and would you believe they had to turn people away? This was a huge event. Comparing to what they had the set up at Seagulls, Seagulls had, from memory, roughly around the 50 table mark. They could fit into such probably a double size of what they had at Seagulls, what they had. This is the setup that they had at the Gold Coast Turf and Event Centre. This is the final table with the various rings and trophies to the side. That's the RFID table. This is down the end where they had all the self-dealt tables, and again looking towards the other end of the hall, massive hall, as it 101 tables there. And at the opposite end of the hall, these are the dealer dealt larger oval tables that they had set up. So really nice setup, really massive room, but still not enough for the amount of players that turned up to play. There's the various rings and trophies that were awarded during the series. Always nice trophies and rings, as you'd expect from WPT League. And this time, they also had Faded Spade on board, I think, with the RFID table in terms of sponsorship. They also had some flips on occasion at the little stand-up blackjack table. And this is the view from just outside the event centre where we played, looking at the Gold Coast skyline. And you also get the evening view with the lights. So really nice setting, really nice place, really nice venue. Generally pretty well run and a good series overall. So this event broke all sorts of records. They had 22 events over 5 days. The series actually had guarantees this time, unlike a number of other series that have been running or plan to be run in the near future, which have just estimates. This time, WPT League ran with guarantees for, I believe, all the events in the series. And those guarantees, as you saw previously with the APT and their event that they had in Brisbane a little bit earlier, those guarantees were smashed. We had a $500,000 guarantee across the series. That ended up turning into over $1.2 million in prize money given away. So massive turnout. Turns out the main event was the biggest single live event ever held in the, I believe it was actually the Southern Hemisphere. I'm not sure if it was just Australia, but there were, I think it was 2,156 players, 2,405 entries, because with WPT League they give out tickets to the main event with a lot of their weekly events at pubs and clubs around Queensland. And apparently 249 of those didn't turn up to play. So there was an extra 249 entries in the prize pool. Total number of players, 2,156 over 4 flights. But that was just massive. Nothing like that is what they could have expected. In terms of what I did during the series, I actually ended up playing in 4 events. Ended up playing the Deep Stack, the Royal Hold'em, the Super Stack, and the Pot Limit Omaha events. Unfortunately, overflowing caches. We'll get to a little bit about how I did later. But I wanted to break down the series a bit of a good, bad, and ugly style. Obviously, the venue is fantastic. And I think that actually had a lot to do with the extra numbers, being that it was actually on the Gold Coast. Bundall, pretty centrally located on the Gold Coast, made it much more attractive for players for Brisbane rather than having to get all the way down to Tweed, where you're looking at potentially another hour and a half, 2 hour commute if you were doing the sort of daily trip down to Tweed Heads for an event. You'd effectively have to book accommodation and stay somewhere overnight rather than sort of thinking, okay, you have a late finish at 2 a.m, you've got another hour and a half, 2 hour drive to get back to Brisbane. If you're in Gold Coast, it's hour or less depending on which part of Brisbane you're trying to get to. So you did need that accommodation, made a much more attractive place for Brisbane. You also had the usual crowd from the Sunshine Coast, various players from Sydney now that they were able to travel. Yeah, people come up from Melbourne, people from Adelaide, all over the country turned up to this event and made it a massive, massive event. Obviously, being one of the first post-COVID events, people are still itching for live poker. Again, as we saw with the APT and their numbers that were huge. This time, again, smashing numbers with all events. They met the guarantees on all the events and had huge numbers. The main event actually $175 buy-in and a $50,000 first prize. Just extraordinary numbers in terms of both the number of people there and the number of people turning out. And having said that, I think it could have been bigger if other issues didn't come into play, which we'll get to again a little bit later. In terms of how it was run, in terms of the poker itself, pretty well run. TDs, they were busy for the whole time. They worked well. We'll get to some issues that they did have later on, but for the most part, a pretty well run series. I don't think there are any major issues in terms of the poker itself. You could tell just by getting there. I remember turning up there for my first event that I played on the Wednesday night when the car park was pretty full and it was actually hard to find a car park. You knew that this was going to be a huge event before you even walked in. So good that they got the numbers, good that it was well run, and yeah, well done to WPT League for that aspect of it. In terms of the bad, two things to me, possibly even three, really stood out. The big one was obviously with the large numbers, the queues. The queues were massive. I saw they actually posted a video on their Facebook page of the queue for Saturday morning registration for the Saturday morning flight, which ended up having, I believe, almost 650 runners for that one single flight of the main event. They actually had the line stretching around half of the hall. It was huge. Apparently, people were waiting for 2 hours just to register. So the registration process and the lines created by it, that was really one issue. I think APT did a much better job in terms of using the app and that type of thing to make it a bit quicker. But yeah, I suppose it was unprecedented numbers, so they weren't really expecting it. But yeah, the queues were a huge issue. The two other big complaints or problems that they did have happened again on the Saturday morning or going into Saturday afternoon. So they had that huge field for the main event on the Saturday morning. They also had I believe it was a high roller or one of the dealer run events also happening at the same time. I didn't hear quite too much of it from what I heard, apparently that area filled up relatively quickly. They took registrations, made them alternates. At one point, I heard they had over 100 alternates. And what they ended up doing was offering players a partial refund to, instead of being at dealer dealt tables, they were going to run it, at least part of the event, as a self-dealt event. Some players took up the offer, took the extra 20 or 30 bucks or whatever they offered as a refund, played it, at least the initial tables, as self-dealt, and then obviously continued on in the event. But others just simply walked in and didn't play it. So I believe that Saturday high roller event, I can't think of what it was off the top of my head, but that had over 400 entries as well. So when you have the 400 entries into that event combined with the 600 plus into the main event, that created the third problem, which was the plan for the Saturday afternoon was to run some satellites. I was actually looking to play in one of the main event satellites on Saturday afternoon. I think it was scheduled for 2 p.m. Got there, lined up, and within a few minutes it kind of filtered down the line. All the satellites are cancelled because there's basically no room, nowhere to put it. So all the satellites, I think there was actually three satellites planned for that Saturday afternoon. One for the main event, as well as others for the high rollers, which was on the one of the high roller events, which was on the following day. They all got scrapped. So they did stick to their 22 advertised events, but their advertised satellites got cancelled. So Saturday for me was a write-off. I turned up, found out there wasn't a game on, and left. As for my own events that I played in, as I said earlier, played in 4 events. Wednesday night played in the Deep Stack. They had, I believe, 207 entries for that one. I finished midfield around 100th. Nothing particularly special to say one way or the other about that one. Unfortunately, I had to skip the Thursday night. I would have loved to have played the short deck, but unfortunately had to miss that one. Had to look after the kids at home. So Friday night, got out again, went to the Royal Hold'em. 214 entries for that, top 24 played, and to be honest, I was in a decent position, and I really think I basically effectively punted my stack when I didn't have to. Finished up 35th, missed the money. We'll get to a couple of critical hands in that in a minute, but yeah, that was the one real personal disappointment, was not making the cash in the Royal Hold'em event from the position that I was in. Then the Sunday, had the Super Stack, 274 entries, I think, for that one, top 30 paid. Had some moments, so I had to go through some hands again with that a little bit later. Ended up finishing about 75th, so a little bit off the money, but again, still a pretty deep run, so again, a little bit disappointing that how things turned out, but I'll get to how the bust out happened a little bit later on. And to finish up, Potley Omaha. Played that on the Sunday night, and again, frustration of Potley Omaha. Ended up with, I believe it was 120 or so runners for that one. Ended up finishing midfield around 50th. But again, the hands that happen, I'll run through those in a bit. But yeah, 4 events, nothing spectacular that first one on the Wednesday, but those 3 events, the Friday night's Royal Hold'em or the Mega Stack. Was it Mega Stack or Super Stack? One of the Deep Stack events that they had. The Super Stack on the Sunday, and then the Potley Omaha on the Sunday night. Bit disappointing with those ones, but again, that's the swings, the variance of tournament poker. So that's how my event went. Again, congratulations to all the winners. Again, we had the situation a little bit like we saw with the APT with the player of the series. Again, that was another huge, both in terms of numbers and players looking to get it. So you had a lot of people multi-tabling. I know we had the one of the Hold'em events, which is also on the same night. It's actually the Royal Hold'em event, I think, on the same night as the teams event. And that was a sort of team of two where you alternated levels. So you had players that would go and play the teams event for one level, then they come back and play the Royal Hold'em for a level, and then go back, and sort of they were alternating between events there, which had moments. So I know at one point they were playing it. Obviously, it's with only 20 cards in the deck, you can only play it six-handed at the most. But we had at one point we had a full table of six, where we only had 4 people sitting. We had 2 people off of the teams event. One person went out for a smoke or a bathroom break or whatever else. So we're playing at a full table with 3 players, and yeah, it was a little bit weird on that sense, and one of the issues with the timing and that type of thing. But I suppose if they're running these Player of the Series events and there's that incentive to multi-table, then you are going to have these issues. But anyway, let's jump into some poker hands and see how I managed to throw away my tournaments. So be back in a minute with some cards. So the first of the disaster hands in the Royal Hold'em, I was sitting with roughly about 150,000 in chips. Blinds were 5 and 10,000, and I'm in small blind. Obviously big blinds 10k, and under the gun player raises to 25,000. I believe she just sat down at the table. I played with her a few times before, generally fairly aggressive, but I looked down at Ace King, and Royal Hold'em, pretty good hand, maybe a little bit better suited. There's obviously one combination of flush or Royal Flush, which adds to the hand, but Ace King's a pretty good hand for Royal Hold'em. However, part of the issue with Royal Hold'em, which for whatever reason I didn't take into account in this hand, is that it's very much a post-flop game. So here, what I ended up doing, took my 12 blind and I went all in. Big blind folded, and we get round back to the undergun player, who snap calls and turns over good old pocket aces. And unfortunately, Ace King can't run down the pocket aces, so that drops my stack. Big chip up for the undergun player, and I'm left with 35,000. And in fact, the very next hand turned out to be my bust out hand. So this time I was on the button with my 35,000 in chips. Again, still 5-10 blinds, but the blinds were about to go up next hand to 10 and 20,000. So the player who was undergun this time had a look at what I had left and decided to raise to 40,000. Folded around to me on the button. I looked down at Ace Queen, decided to shove the 35k in. Blinds got out of the way. Big stack took his change back. Snap call and rolled over pocket kings. Ordinarily, not such a bad situation to be in Royal Hold'em. You got the overcard. I know Ace Queen wasn't suited, but having one overcard when you've only got 20 cards in the deck is much better than having one overcard when you've got 52 cards in the deck. However, the board didn't really go my way. I ran out King, Jack. So it was almost flop dead right from the get-go. However, having said that, again, it is Royal Hold'em. There are always opportunities. Turn. Jack gave me a whole heap of outs. Obviously now I can... I'm not completely dead. I can make a Jack. If there's a Jack on the river, then we both have quads, but I've got an ace kicker. So I did have outs. However, or at least an out. However, the 10 on the river meant that I was doing the walk of shame and going home, as I said, in 35th place, just out of the money. Won't go into too much detail in terms of worrying about chips and things like that for this one, but this was from the Super Stack event on the Sunday. So the blinds are 400, 800. I'm in mid position. Look down at the old ace 9 suited. Decided to be folded to me, so I'll put in a raise, make it a 2400. Get a couple of callers, and what looks like a reasonable flop. Ace, 8, 4 with 2 hearts, flop top pair, reasonable kicker. Didn't really have any resistance. It was just calling pre-flop, so there's a good chance I've got the only ace. So I decided to lead the flop for 4k. The big blind turns around and raises it up to 12,000. Obviously, this is an interesting spot for me. I decided to make the call, and we get a turn where the board pairs for a spades. Not the greatest card for me, given that a 4 is in his range. However, there are a lot of hands that are also in his range. Aces, which could be better than me, could be worse than me. Heart draws, various straight draws with sort of a combination of 5, 6, 7. So I think the 4, not a great card, but again, it could be a worse card for my hand. Could have been a heart in between 4 and 8. However, he decides to lead this time for 12,000. I've got 56,000 behind, and I decide to just run with it. I shove. He turns over the old 5, 3 of hearts for the flush draw and the gut shot. So quite a lot of cards to dodge on the river. However, brick on the river, and I double up. So happy with that hand, and made my super stack a little bit more super. Next interesting hand from the super stack a little bit later, and this time I'm in the big blind. We've got 3 limps in front of me. I decide to check. I look down at ace 5 of hearts, check my option. This is at 4,000, 8,000 blind. So get to see a flop, which looks pretty favourable for my hand. As Andrew Nimi would say, 9 of hearts, 7 of spades, 6 of hearts. So we flopped a nut flush draw and a gut shot straight draw. I decided to check. The first player under the gun +2 decides to bet 15,000, and there's a call behind him. With a pretty big draw, again, nut flush, as well as, albeit at the bottom end of a straight draw, but a straight draw. I decided to raise it up to 75,000. The initial bettor decides to make the call for his tournament life for just under 60,000, and the other player gets out of the way. We turn over our cards. He has ace 8, so he's got the open-ended straight draw and the overcard with the ace. The board runs out with a 9 and an ace on the river. So we now both have aces of 9s, and the 8 kicker plays, and I managed to drop half my stack. So a little bit frustrating, but that is again how tournament poker works, and one of the many hands that happen in the super stack. And on to my bust-out hand from the super stack. This time blinds were 10 and 20,000. They're about to go up to 20, 40,000. And we had a monster sack at the table that was effectively running over the table. She had a round, I believe it was actually the woman that knocked me out from the Royal Hold'em earlier in the series. However, she was sitting with would have been close to 1 million in chips, maybe a little bit more. So she was effectively playing every hand. This time she was, I believe, in the cutoff. She just grabbed a handful of 25k chips and plonked down in front, which was enough to cover everybody behind her. I looked down at what was Old Faithful, ace 9 of diamonds. I decided to make the call for, I think it was about 80,000 total. So she has me well covered. She turns over hand, and she has the old Jack 5 suited. So I've got diamonds covered. I've got overcard with the ace, looking like I'm in pretty good shape, and the flop helps quite a bit because it brings me a flush draw. So I've got the diamond draw, I still have the ace, I still have the 9, she's missed everything, but of course, offsuit 5 on the turn, nothing for me on the river, and time for the walk of shame for tournament number 3. Again, out in about 75th place, this time a little bit out of the money where we had top 30 paid, but still again a bit frustrating to be in the situation where you have the big stack, essentially just playing every hand, and when you do decide to make a stand with a reasonable hand that actually has her fairly well dominated, finds a way to get there with the old offsuit and bottom pair. Pot leaving Omaha, this time 4-card poker. I turned up a little bit late after busting out of the super stack. Ended up getting seated to the direct left of a guy who was a big stack. Obviously, he was someone who had played a bit of Omaha before. He could calculate pot sizes pretty quickly, and he was being very aggressive. So, given that he already had the table covered, it meant that I was a little bit hamstrung and couldn't really play many hands. He was coming in for a raise almost every single time. So, my options were somewhat limited, knowing that he had, again, the table covered, and I was potentially playing for, or going to be playing for my whole stack every single time I entered a pot. So this hand was the first one of the disaster trip, and it started off with, I was in the small blind, again, the active guy who was the button limp, there were a couple of other limpers in front of him. I looked down at Jack 10-9, a decent hand for Omaha, well connected. I've got a suit with hearts. Again, in a typical game, if it's limped to me, I'd be looking to raise, but didn't really want to get blown off the hand, so I just decided to complete in the small blind. And flop looks pretty good for my hand. It was a Jack 6-7 with 2 diamonds. So I led for 3,000. The big blind shoved for 9,500. The under the gun player who had limped in decided to call, and I reshoved for around 20,000. And the under the gun player decided to call. And this is where it gets interesting. So we have our board of Jack 6-7 with 2 diamonds. The player with the short stack who was all in had a reasonable holding. I can't fault him for his play. Queen 10-8-9 with the 8-9 of diamonds. So the open-ended straight flush draw, albeit with a 10 blocker in the hand. But still, I can't fault his play. Now, again, his hand's reasonably connected. And again, the way that the table had been playing, seeing a free flop was perfectly justified. And of course, the other player who decided to get involved in the hand, King 3-7 with, I suppose he did have a diamond flush draw, so can't really blame him for that one. But my run being my run, offsuit 5 on the turn, giving the 8-9 straight. Offsuit 4 on the river means that my pocket jacks take down the side pot, but the main pot goes to the 8-9 of diamonds. So actually ended up pretty much back where I started after the hand, with the side pot being around 20k. So actually didn't really lose much on the hand, but again, just frustrating that you flop top set and it goes nowhere. And the good old bust out hand from the pot leaving Omaha. This time blinds were 500, 1,000. I'm sitting in the small blind. There are 2 limps in front of me. At the button, the very active player decides to raise to 3,500. I look down at 1 ace, 2 ace, a 9 and a jack of hearts. Not the greatest aces you can get, but pretty reasonable. Got a suit, not the nut suit. Got aces, got ace jack 9, which is sort of somewhat connected. I decide to pot for 13,500. This then decides that the hijack who's limp calls, the undergun player that limped calls, the hijack that limped called, and the button calls. So you have 4 ways to a flop, which is not ideal for my hand, but still not completely unreasonable. 2 of clubs, 3 of hearts, 10 of hearts. And this is where things get a bit crazy, as you do with Omaha. I'm sitting there with 5,000 behind. I started with just under 20,000. So I'm putting my 5,000 in. I was going in regardless of the flop, but I've got many overcards and a flush draw, so I'm definitely in. Put in for my remaining 5k. The under the gun player decides to re-raise. The hijack hems and haws a bit and eventually calls, and the button gets out of the way. The turn brings an offsuit king. Both players end up all in. The hijack has both of us covered, and of course we turn over our hands. The hijack, I can understand their position in the hand. They have ace, king, king, 4. So they've turned top set, flopped the nut flush draw, and they have a gut shot with the ace 4. So perfectly understandable their position in the hand. However, this was the way that she'd been playing. She said she'd won one of the Omaha tournaments earlier, and she needed to defend her status as the Omaha queen, although frankly I didn't think her play was that good, and she just happened to have a really good hand for this board this time. And of course the player who was under the gun, who was limp calling a 3-bet and then re-raising on the flop, had this lovely hand. Queen, 8-6 rainbow. Absolute piece of cheese. And in fact, I've got him, if I'm just up against this hand, the Queen, 8-6, I actually have that one drawing dead. There's no way that he can improve his hand to beat me. If he gets a queen, that gives me a straight with the ace-jack. There's no other way that he can even make a pair to beat me. So if I'm just up against the guy who's doing the raising and the re-raising, I'm home and hose. However, I'm up against top set. So, and my flush draw is no good. So I'm in a bit of trouble. I need a queen, which we have 2 blockers over here. If the queen of hearts comes out, it makes a flush for the ace king. So I've got 1 queen out. The other ace is out over here. So I have 1 ace out. So I'm actually down to 2 outs. I need the remaining ace, the ace of diamonds, or I need the offsuit queen, the queen of clubs, and not to be 8 of hearts on the river, and the ace king of hearts scoops and takes out 2 players. And again, that was another disappointing one. Finished at about 50th place. Again, I think compared to the rest of the field, or the vast majority of the field, Omaha is not everybody's game. They feel like it's a big gambling game, but it really shouldn't be, and people just don't know when to fold. They don't recognise what a good hand is, and I think there was so much value to be had in that tournament, so it's just, again, disappointing to bust out anyway. But yeah, that's how tournament poker goes. So that was the final hand for my QPC. So that's going to wrap up vlog number 42 and the QPC for the start of 2021. I think it's a bit of a sign of things to come with the post-COVID, post-pandemic poker. There's really not a lot of poker around. I mean, there are home games going on. Casino poker's just started up again up here in Queensland. But I think for the short term, at least, the various series that are being run are going to be huge. There's another APT coming up later in March. Following month, there's also one from Check Raise Poker. 2 big series planned. I think they will be huge. Hopefully I'll play in a few events at both. But again, I think it's just a state of poker at the moment. There's not enough, not much happening in live poker. Crown Poker Room down in Melbourne still closed. I think Star in Sydney still isn't running any poker. So a lot of players are starved of live poker. The online situation has been ridiculous for the last few years. So since the various legislation got brought in, so legally you're not allowed to play poker online. So it really gives Australian players very, very few options, and we can see the result when there is a good series put on. In this case by WPT. So huge numbers, 1.2 million plus in terms of prize money given away. Huge series, and in the short term, I'd expect that to continue with poker tournaments around the country. And again, hope to see you for the next one, which is likely to be the APT from Southport Sharks. So hope to see you again soon. That's it for Poker with Kids, vlog number 42. Like, share, subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it, and please comment and let me know what you think of the video down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.